January 28th to order. We'll rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from January 14th.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 3, first selectmen's comments. I will reserve any comments for till later, but the one thing I would like to say is we have citizens' comments coming up next. There's a lot of people here tonight, and we have a presentation from Great Blue that we need to have. I'd like to ask if you would hold off your comments until after the presentation, because they may answer a lot of your questions, they may not, I don't know. But and then when we do allow for comments, it'll be comments. It won't be conversation, won't be discussion, just comments, okay? But I think this will get us through it a little bit quicker, and maybe you'll all hear what you want to hear. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banish. So, greetings, folks. Welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight and spending some time out of your evening to go over the results with us. My name is Dan Quattroselli. I'm with Great Blue Research. We're a market research company based in Cromwell, Connecticut. And we worked with the town and the Academy Guidance Committee to formulate this study and this research program to really uncover what folks want to do with the future of the Academy School. So we put together this presentation that we have projected up here and has been handed out to you all. We're going to walk you through kind of the study, the findings, the summary at the very end, and then, as Mr. Banish alluded to, we'll open it up to some questions.
Let me just make one comment. I guess we ran out of the actual printed copy. So if you didn't get one, it'll be on the website tomorrow morning. You can see it there. But what he's showing us here is exactly what we handed out.
And maybe share with your neighbor if you can.
And I'll make sure to take our time a little bit going through so folks can follow along and really get a full grasp of it. So this is kind of just a table of contents where we get a little overview of things that we're going to be covering this evening in the presentation. Better? Perfect. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we were commissioned by the town of Madison, and we worked in conjunction with the Academy Guidance Committee to gauge an understanding of the preferred path for the Academy School moving forward. Now, what we did was we presented 7 options for the proposed redevelopment or reuse of the school, and we proposed them in a support or opposition format as if it was going to a referendum vote to determine which of the 7 options town residents most strongly supported. So to do this, we employed a dual methodology where we conducted both phone surveys, and then we also had an online survey that was available on the town's website. We conducted a total of 403 phone surveys and a total of 2,000 digital surveys. The goals of this were to hopefully allow the town to more clearly understand the support and opposition towards these 7 redevelopment options for the school, gauge the degree to which residents opposed or supported each of those options, so the relative strength at which their conviction lies, and then identify the single option which would be most likely to pass at a referendum. So as we mentioned, the areas of investigation specifically for this study were the support or opposition for those 7 different proposals regarding the future usage of the Academy School. 4 of those options were for private development, and 3 were for community use. We looked at the relative strength of support or opposition towards each of those proposals. We then presented each resident with all 7 options together and asked them out of the 7 to select one that would be their favorite and the one that they would most support if it went to referendum. And at the very end, we did some general demographic questions such as gender, age, things of that nature, so we can understand a little bit of the respondent snapshot. Can folks hear me a little better now?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So without going too in-depth into each of these proposals, what we wanted to do here in the presentation was outline the exact language that was used in the phone survey and then also presented to residents when they were taking the online survey. So these were the 4 options that involved the resale and redevelopment of the Academy School for a developer use. The 4 proposals were the Dakota proposal, the Women's Institute proposal, the RAL proposal, and the Horton Group proposal. Additionally, the 3 proposals that we looked at involving the community use of the building centered on the town park proposal, the town hall proposal, and the community center proposal. So again, 4 of the options involved the resale and redevelopment of the Academy School to a developer, and these 3 options involved Town of Madison keeping the building and repurposing it for a community use. The research methodology snapshot gives you an overall context and flavor as to this study specifically. So as we mentioned, the methodology was a combination of telephone and online. We had a total of 403 phone surveys, 2,000 digital surveys. So a total of 30 questions in the survey. The asterisk indicates that not every question may not be asked to each respondent, depending on the nature of how they responded and if that answer necessitated them to potentially skip over another question. There was no incentive provided for participating. Sometimes there is either a cash or some sort of compensation for participating, but we pretty much just asked folks to offer their feedback on their preferred desires for the school moving forward, and folks were more than willing to provide their feedback. The sample list that we used is we targeted folks that were registered voters and or tax-paying residents in the town of Madison. And that's important because these would be the folks that would be qualified to vote if this went to referendum. So we wanted to make sure we were targeting the individuals in this survey that would be able to then actually go and vote when it would be time to do so. As we mentioned, this was specifically among residents in the town of Madison. Without getting too in-depth into the margin for error, depending on folks' understanding of statistics, the 4.8% on the phone indicates that if we were to conduct this study, 95 times out of 100, the results you see tonight are going to come back within 4.8 percentage points. So that's the idea. When you look at things for comparison, you're comparing scores from one program to the next. If things are within 4.8 percentage points, then there's not a statistical significant difference. If it's a greater than 4.8 percentage point difference, then it's a difference that you can note as being statistically significant, and that's a relevant difference. So as you can see, depending on the number of folks that you talk to, that number can shift. So because we talk to slightly fewer folks online, that margin for error is slightly larger than the online sample. When we look at the research dates, we include that in there as well because we discussed that research is a snapshot in time, and that this survey was conducted specifically during November 26th through December 16th. So any types of initiatives or things going on around Madison, around that time frame, could have affected survey results if they may be different than going on right now. So that's the way we kind of describe that research being a snapshot in time, that things surveyed at that specific period of time could be different than if they were surveyed a year prior or a year down the road. We provided this information here for a demographic snapshot of who exactly took the survey. Now, from the phone perspective, we had specific quotas in place where we talked to a representative sampling of Madison residents. So when we talked to folks on the phone, our goal was to have the gender and age breakdown match up the census demographic information for the town of Madison. So if you look at the phone breakdown, it's about a 40 to 60% male-female split. Which actually mirrored very closely as well from the online completion perspective. So we were very pleased to see that the online numbers tracked from a representative perspective as well. From an age perspective, the phone information, we also tracked that against census information, so all the quotas there track age as well. You'll notice that online, there's slight propensity towards younger respondents to be taking the online survey, which is something that we typically expect as well. Again, this is just more so for a contextual snapshot understanding of the types of folks that filled out the survey. Primarily, folks were working full-time, but 1 out of every 3 phone respondents were retired. When you look at voting and tax paying, again, the primary majority amount of folks, voting 9 out of 10, are both registered voters and paying taxes. And a smaller number of each are either or, whether they're registered to vote or just paying taxes in town. Majority of homeowners, majority of survey respondents do not have children under the age of 18 at home, while you look at about 25% of phone respondents did have a dependent under the age of 18 at home. So now we'll step into the key study findings. We'll really look program and proposal by proposal to look at the level of support and opposition for each. So primarily for the Dakota proposal, what you'll notice is that slightly less than 3/4 of residents oppose that proposal. So more folks were against it than they were in support of it, with only 28.5 in support of that proposal. What I'll do is we'll touch a little bit on the level of strength and opposition for each of these as we get into the granular slides, because some of the graph representations will make that stand out a little bit more for folks as well. But again, looking at the Women's Institute proposal, more than 4 out of 5 Madison residents said they would oppose that proposal if it was put to a referendum. Only 19.6% of respondents said they would support that specific proposal. The RAL proposal was opposed by 2 out of every 3 Madison residents and only approved by or supported by 1/3. The final development option from a redevelopment perspective was the Horton Group proposal, and very similarly to the RAL proposal, 2 out of every 3 residents opposed that proposal, while 32% supported. Now looking at the community repurposing options, the town park proposal was opposed by 69.5%, so again, slightly more than 2 out of 3 respondents, and was supported by 30.5% of respondents. The town hall proposal was opposed by a similar number, 67%, and 33% supported that proposal. The one proposal that did receive more support than opposition was the community center proposal. It received 59.1% support compared to 40.9% opposition. Now those 7 options were all presented in a binary support or opposition. Do you support or oppose this proposal? The final bullet point that we have here is where we presented all options together and said, out of these 7 options, which is the single one that you would select out of the 7? And more Madison residents expressed support for the community center proposal. 3 out of every 5 town residents selected that out of the 7 as the option they would support than any other proposal. Conversely, the Women's Institute proposal was the least supported and least selected option at 19.6. A couple other contextual pieces is we noticed that there was a difference in women versus men in support of many of these options. 72.2% of those in support of the town hall proposal were female, compared to only 27.8% of male respondents. Further, nearly 2/3 of those in support of the community center proposal were female, compared to 36.1% that were male. So again, if we looked at 2/5, the 7 options, they would be more likely to support a referendum. 2/5 said they would select the community center. Roughly 1 out of 7 said they would select the town park proposal or the RAL proposal. That comes to about 14% there. And again, the Women's Institute was the least supported proposal out of those options. We also asked a question, in addition to just the building itself, when you look at the land and the parking areas surrounding the Academy School, we wanted to know if folks thought that that should be included in the sale as well. So the additional proposal involving the sale of the land surrounding the Academy received opposition from the majority of residents. About 85% opposed the sale of the land as well. And as you can see, the majority of folks strongly opposed that idea of selling the land as well. At the very end, we asked that open-ended question, if folks could think of anything additionally that they would want to offer as a way that the school could be repurposed, either from a development perspective or from a community repurposing and reuse perspective. Some of the suggestions that folks offered were commercial development, arts and entertainment center, or using it as a school or academic center. So now we're going to get a little more specifically into the 7 options themselves. This slide we put together so you can compare all 7 options at once. Each of the blue graphs shows the total amount of support that each option has, and each of the red graphs shows the amount of opposition. If you start at the top, you'll see the 2 Dakota options, where you can compare the phone data in the top line against the online data in the second line. And then as you continue down in blocks of 2, the options are grouped together so you can see how they compare with their phone and online scores, but then also against each other. So as you can see, the
redevelopment or resale options to developers are up top, whereas the Town of Madison keeping for community use, the Academy School, are the options down at the bottom. So as you can see, the community center option stood out as that which received and garnered the most support from Madison residents, 59.1% support from the phone and 68.4% from the online perspective. So we'll specifically touch quickly on each of the proposals. The Dakota proposal, you saw that was supported by only 28.5% of phone respondents, opposed by 71.5%. Very similar numbers online from an opposition and support perspective. As you can see, the majority of folks would moderately support this if they were to support it. Conversely, the folks that do oppose this more so strongly oppose it than moderately oppose. You see a consistent theme here with the Women's Institute proposal. It was only supported by 1 out of every 5 Madison town residents, 19.6%. And again, if you look at the level of conviction folks have on the support or opposition side, the folks that are opposing in that dark red bar at 71.9 or 68.3% is a much stronger conviction than the folks on the support side, where you look at strongly support at 25.3 and 19.6. So from a conviction level, the folks that are opposing this have a strong conviction on the opposition side. Again, very similar numbers here on the RAL proposal. You see a little more on the support piece, supported by 1 out of every 3 Madison residents. And the level to which folks support that proposal is a little stronger as well, with 2 out of every 5 residents strongly supporting it. However, this is a very divisive proposal, as you can see, because those who do oppose it, 4 out of every 5 strongly oppose this option. The last redevelopment option would be for the Horton Group proposal. In addition, or similar to the RAL Group, had a support level of 32%, opposition of 68%. So it's again about that 1 out of every 3 resident support versus 2 out of every 3 oppose. Now looking at the town park option, you see, again, very similar numbers here from a 1 out of every 3 supporting it, about 2 out of every 3 opposing it. Slightly stronger on the online perspective from the support as you get closer to about 2 out of every 5 residents. But you do see there's some slight variance there on the conviction as to how strongly folks support it from an online or phone perspective. So some slight differences there, but from an overall perspective, you see it falls very much in line with a lot of the other proposals in their relative rankings. The town hall proposal, you see, was again supported by 1 out of every 3 town residents on the phone side and opposed by 2 out of 3. You saw an increase in support here from the online perspective, where 2 out of every 5 residents supported this proposal in the online survey. You will note that some slight variance there from the level at which folks oppose this option, which does make sense. If you look at the support from an online perspective being about 7 points higher, it would only then stand to reason that the level at which those who strongly oppose this option is lower online than versus the phone. Now what you will see here, this is the one option out of the 7 that did garner more support than opposition for both phone and online respondents. So at about 3 out of every 5 phone respondents and at about 2 out of every 3 online respondents reported their support for the community center proposal, while a decreased number, 2 out of 5 or 1 out of every 3 from the online perspective opposed this proposal. You will note that folks that do support this proposal strongly support it, as nearly 3 out of 5 indicated that they do strongly support this proposal from both a phone and online perspective. So this is the question where we asked all the respondents these 7 options at once, and we said, out of the 7 options, rather than just indicating whether you support it or oppose, we want you to select the one out of the 7 that you would support at referendum. And as you'll note from the phone and online results, at 41.9% on the phone, 51.3% online, town residents would most strongly support the community center proposal as the single option that they would vote for at referendum. The relative rankings here fall very much in line when you look at the binary support or opposition slides that you saw previously, with the community center, town park, RAL, and town hall proposals all falling towards that top side of the rankings. Again, we touched on splitting out a little bit of the building versus the land and surrounding area around Academy School. And we asked folks, if the proposal involved the sale of the land and that went to referendum, would you support or oppose that? As you can see here, folks are strongly in opposition of selling land, parking lot, and areas around the building in addition to the proposal. So you can see that only 15.1% of respondents would support that versus about 85% reported opposition there. As we mentioned in an open-ended catch-all type question at the end of the survey, we asked respondents if they could creatively offer any suggestions of ideas of how they think the school could be redeveloped, repurposed, reused. The majority of folks, more than 3 out of 5 from a phone perspective and more than 2/3 from an online perspective, couldn't offer any suggestions, just didn't have anything to say. Whereas the primary suggestion folks would offer would be an arts and entertainment center, whether that would be an arts school, playhouse, theater, concert hall, cultural arts center, performing center, anything that really involves the arts and being creative culturally. You also look at the second option there, commercial developments, whether it's hotel, marketplace, retail, restaurants, so more of your business type activities from a redevelopment option. And then as you can see, you get some more granular, lower level, smaller numbers of feedback here for some additional options, such as turning it back into a school, using it as a community center, anything that produces tax revenue, turning it into all green space, turning it into more affordable housing, or just having all town services there. So what we often saw is folks confirming many of the things that were potentially offered in the survey itself. What we did try to show here is when we looked at some of the granular differences in residents depending on how they responded based on gender, and we noted that men oftentimes had increased support levels for options that involved the resale of the school to a developer, whereas you can see women had increased support levels for options that involved the school being kept and redeveloped by the town, where the town retains ownership in either the town park, town hall, or the community center options. So you can see there even throughout, women generally supported more of these options than men, with the exception of that RAL proposal, Horton Group. Those are the instances where men had increased support levels. But throughout, we saw that the options that were involved, the school being redeveloped and utilized by a developer, you saw men having increased support level there, whereas women, you see an increased support level on the community redevelopment options. So to kind of wrap it up and step back from the granular data and give you kind of that 30,000 foot view, the considerations that we've gleaned from the data in this study are that based on the phone survey data, and we prioritize that because we were able to put specific quotas in place that are going to match the demographic base and the respondents of Madison to make it representative of your town. So based off of that phone data, your residents are most likely to support the community center proposal, followed by the RAL proposal, the town hall, Horton Group, town park, Dakota, and Women's Institute. So those are pretty much what we saw there is the rankings of the options. And then it's just one of our recommendations moving forward is now that you kind of see what the ideas are, any potential research potentially for fine-tuning any of the proposals, options, what folks may specifically want in a community center, should that be the option to be selected, moving forward. At the very end, I included my contact information. Should folks have any questions, needs, feel free to email. No worries there. At this point, I will kick it back to Mr. Banish, and then I will be available here for questions from the room or comments, however you want.
On to the mic. Okay. Thank you, Dan. What I'd like to do first is if the selectmen have any questions, you guys can ask the questions, and then we'll turn it open for comments from the...
So I look at the information, and I appreciate the way that you've parsed it out, you've separated it. Is there any way to interpret this data that doesn't say the community has a strong preference for a community center in this? Does this data say the community has a preference for a community center?
It does, and the way you look at it too is the relative support levels and the gaps.
I think there we go. So when you look at the gap between the community center scores, which was supported at that high 50s to about 60%, and it was about a 30% gap from there to the rest of the scores, it very markedly is the community center was the winner. Other than the Women's Institute proposal, the other 5 options had about a 5 to 6 point variance between them. So they were very tightly grouped between the town hall, town park, Dakota, RAL. The really 2 outliers were the Women's Institute on the low end, but then the community center really stood out on that high end.
In the community center, the people who expressed opposition expressed pretty strong opposition, as did people who expressed support. That was the one example where the strong feeling was nearly equal. Is there anything that we should take away from that, other than people are firmly committed to their support or their opposition?
I think that's exactly what it is. People are very supportive of the option because they see it as a Commonwealth type thing where anybody can benefit off of it. But there will be some folks that say, hey, you know what, there's a dollar cost associated with this that I will have to pay an increase in tax for funding it. And some folks just may say, I don't want to pay any increase in that. Those might be the folks that might be more inclined to go with a resale redevelopment option because then you could sell the building, garner some money for it, and then it has a benefit from a financial perspective on the back end to that resident.
But to expand on that, if we aggregate the municipal ownership options and the sale options, clearly the municipal ownership in the aggregate has a strong preference, right?
Correct. If you looked at those 3 options that were the community keeping, town hall, town park, and the community center, those netted out to about 45% support when you average out the 3 of them. Whereas the resale and redevelopment options, that was under 30% support there.
So is it fair to interpret that as the community prefers that we hang on to the property as we figure out the next step, which is, according to this study, a community center?
Correct.
Okay.
So one thing that was kind of very active during the polling was there were a lot of signs around town, people expressing their opinion about what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was community center and save the fields. Over time, does that change? Does that stay the same?
As we touched on, it gets back to that snapshot in time piece that we discussed about with survey research. So obviously, any initiatives going on where if there was a groundswell of public support, would that have pushed the numbers a little bit? Absolutely. But it would have been no different than any type of support that will go on during a referendum period when you think of people supporting a vote. So really, when looking at a lot of the advertisements, things going on, a lot of the Facebook posts, things of that nature, there was support for not only the community center, but a lot of other options out there. So I think a lot of it too is when you do look at a groundswell of support at that specific time, I think it does speak a little bit to what people in town do want.
Last question. Our goal in having you do this work was to deliver back to us an unbiased representative sample of how the town was thinking about this property, do you feel like you've delivered on that requirement?
Absolutely, because the way I would delineate that is from an online perspective, it's an opt-in. Anyone could go to the website and choose to take that survey. So our concern when you look at the groundswell of people trying to maybe push an agenda of one specific program, we feel as though we would have seen that manifest itself in the online data. Because that's where you could really tell your friends, your family, email a bunch of people and say, hey everyone, vote for this one specific proposal. So our concern would have been if we saw the Women's Institute proposal go from 7th on the phone to 1st online. Because on the phone, it's the pure randomness of who we happen to call. And beyond that, once we get you on the phone, you then qualify based off of do you fit then the town demographics. So from being representative and ensuring that we're getting people on the phone, really they could still be affected by seeing a sign on the town of the street, a sign on the town of the road, sign on the town of the road. But everyone knows what I'm getting at. We got it. But that's really what it gets at, is from an online perspective, that's where you could see more bias in the data. From the phone perspective, since there's really no controlling who you can get in touch with other than just making sure that they're a town resident.
So when you're placing the phone calls to people, are you deciding based on what you still need to fulfill the 400 demographic quota?
Exactly. So
whether or not you leverage the data or not?
So when you think of the very first record that we call, it could be a male or female. As we get to that 400th, at that point we're looking for a very specific individual within town to make sure that it matches exactly the population. So that very last call could have been a female who is under 25 years old. And we may have to make 400 phone calls to find out one person for that final survey.
I was still trying to reconcile why you guys hung up on me, so.
you may have not have been the young female.
Too old. Well, you might have been.
No, but candidly, that's also the way we want to make sure that the data matches the people that are represented here in the group.
Of course you did.
All right, other questions?
Okay, great. So I would like to open it up for public comment now. Just a couple of things. We have a big crowd here. So if we keep the comments to less than 2 minutes, and if you're going to repeat things that other people are saying, maybe it'd be better to let somebody else talk. Okay, so.
Catherine Hunter. 2 points of clarification. I believe what you said, but maybe not quite as succinctly as this, is that there is such closeness and consistency between the phone poll results and the online survey results that this could be read to be quite directional, consistently directional. So we don't have to have that discussion to debate the qualitative difference between the phone poll and the online survey.
I would say that the phone results and the online results are consistent, and the online results confirm what we saw on the phone piece.
Secondly, just because I think maybe you're not familiar, the question about the land was the ball fields in the park, not just the parking lot and the surrounding land. The standalone question about the land for which you presented the results being in the 80s to mid 80s in opposition to sale is the ballpark in the fields.
I just wanted to mention, this is public comment for anything, so it doesn't have to just be about the Academy School, it could be about anything.
Except for pickleball. It can't be about pickleball.
Vince Dusick, 28 White Birch Road in Madison. Demographically, did you break out 55 and over versus 55 and under? Can I safely say that the seniors in the town agree with the community center? In other words, what is the breakout of that?
We didn't granularly break out from an age perspective. We wanted to give data that would give directional information based off of the entirety of the town, because who can show up to a referendum is everybody. So we want to make sure that when we're presenting the overall data, it was really directional in representing the entire town.
Well, we can't stand here tonight and say that the seniors in town, 55 and over, are in agreement with the community center results. Is that correct? Agree or oppose?
Well, we can dive further into the data and look at that specific group. Because as I mentioned, we didn't.
I would suggest that might be a good idea, based on the demographics of this town having, an inordinate amount of seniors. In other words, it's not representative of how the seniors in town feel.
I would make the argument that it is, because not just seniors are going to vote, you're going to have people that are under 55. So when we're looking at the data and presenting it, we have to present it from an entire snapshot of all respondents, because it's not just seniors 55 and over that are going to be going to vote in the polls.
Okay, so Dan, I just got to remind you that this is public comment.
I apologize.
No, it's not your fault, but it's really folks for you to comment.
I thought it was a question.
It's not a question and answer session.
My name is Tom Lee. I live at 17 Bradley Road in Madison. And my question is, we can pretty well conclude from this, we want to move forward with a community center. When does that actually get started? When do we actually start construction?
Again, this is comments, it's not questions.
Okay.
All right. That'll come out, believe me.
Okay, all right.
Hi, Catherine Ferrante, 71 Cops Road. I just want to comment in response to this gentleman's comment here, I'm sorry, in the black jacket. I believe Dan pointed out earlier that the phone poll demographics were designed to match the demographics of the town. So a representative sample of seniors would have been polled by phone, matching the demographics of the town. I don't know if he made that clear. Thank you.
Terry Vandendolder, 17 Bartlett Drive. I think what the discussion was earlier at the ad hoc committee was that unequivocally about 85% of the community feels that there should be no development of the land or the building. No development, period. And if Catherine Hunter, if you'll speak to the results of the 2011 and 2012 survey that was done, I think it was exactly the same.
Kathy Marsh, 38 Sylvan Road. I'm going to take it before you get to it, Catherine. It seems like the results from this survey match what the community seemed to suggest they wanted in a number of the, what do you call the thing we did? What was
The workshop?
The Fitzgerald Halliday
workshop? No. What was the choice? No, not, what was the survey? Yeah, what was the thing we did online?
Monkey. The survey.
Monkey? Well, survey monkey. It just seems like everything is pretty darn consistent now, and I support a community center. Change.org. Change.org. Oh.
Okay. Any other public comment?
Sorry, I thought it was going over.
Just had two comments. One, something was mentioned about the time that Catherine Donovan, Madison. We started speaking for the land about a year ago. So we would have gone through every month, every season, and the results seem to be the same, that people don't want to use the land for anything other than the town. And the other is that I don't really think it would be fair to, as Catherine Ferrante said, it does represent the population. It wouldn't be fair to pull out what do just the seniors think, as just as it wouldn't have been fair to pull out what do the young people think when we were trying to build a senior center. I think demographically we have to be fair. Everybody has a vote and everybody has their option. Well, and everybody has an opinion and a vote.
Joan Walker, 39 Stepping Stone Lane. I just wanted to comment back to Selectman Wilson. The strong oppose on the community center is not as strong opposed as many of the other options. So to say that this was overwhelmingly strongly opposed, if you go through the other options, most of them actually were more strongly opposed, I guess is the terminology, at least on the phone survey. So I think that that needs to be clarified, because it seemed to indicate in your statement that The people who were really opposed compared to the other options, and the other options had people just as strongly opposed to them.
So I'm sorry if I wasn't clear in my comments. I was simply asking, is there anything we should be taking away from the relative opposition in support of those two things? And I think that the question was no, other than the respondents who oppose it, strongly oppose it, and the opponents the people who want it, strongly want it. And nothing more than that. So I wasn't inferring anything beyond just clarifying.
I think it was consistent with the other options too. People were strongly opposed, same thing, and they were either strongly for or strongly opposed, it seemed.
Dan, at the risk of not knowing what I'm asking here or not knowing what the answer is, a fair amount of the data was based on the support or oppose questions before you get to the one question, what would you choose? And for those questions, people could support all of them or oppose all of them. So if this survey is intended to be directional, perhaps the question that says, okay, now you've heard about the others, you like them, you don't like them, which option will you support to bring to referendum? Is it valid to think that that's the million-dollar question?
Comment.
I think it's valid to think that that's the million-dollar question.
No, the way comments, the citizen comment works is it's just comments.
And I brought a little one with me, support of a community center. I don't want this.
Back here.
Thank you. Art Simon, 65 Bartlett Drive. I obviously clearly see what the results show. I don't think there's any question about that. However, I'd like to know from the supporters of this, given that the schools are asking for $100 million over the next 10 years, and I can't remember a time when the town has had so many wants or needs for money. I'm just curious how the supporters of this project intend for the town of Madison to pay for it. Comments?
Hi, Susan Glantz, 682 Green Hill. In response to the gentleman's question, and I'm not an expert on this, but from the data I've seen and some of what Tom presented last week, the debt in the town is starting to go down from our past expenses and bonds that we've had. We're at the point where that's just starting to decline. And I believe from the data that was on the website that the community center would add to an average household roughly $150 to taxes. Is that anybody else remember that? You know what it was? $150 per household for I'm not sure how many years, based on a bond of whatever, 30 years or something. I think enough people felt that that was not an extreme hardship and that the benefits would outweigh. We do have to deal with the schools too. That's coming along, and I don't even know what that's going to be, but currently I have the understanding that our debt is starting to decline at this point, so we'll need to, and you know, that'll come back up with these new additional projects.
Hi, Catherine Ferrante again. I would just like to add that I think that's a 20-year bond, and that estimate, per household estimate, does not take into account any other sources of funding, such as state and federal tax credits, grants, philanthropic donations, a public capital campaign. So there are other ways to lower that number. And on a personal note, I've chosen this town. I love it. I moved here 5 years ago with my young family. And I will pay that in taxes to have a town that I want to live in, that has activities for me and my family. I think it's a worthy investment. And so, at least for my, personal analysis, I'm glad to pay those taxes to support a community center. On a slightly different subject, but still having to do with the overall town budget, it's my understanding that the fourth grade, what do you call it? Playground. Thank you. The fourth grader playground. That initially the Board of Ed asked for $600,000 for that playground, and that the Board of Selectmen turned it down and appropriated $200,000. That $200,000 has been spent on just surface prep, and now the Board of Ed is asking for $800,000 instead of the original $600,000. And that playground is to include an outdoor amphitheater and outdoor classrooms and all kinds of landscaping. And just wondering, where did we go from $200,000, which Board of Selectmen smartly approved for a fourth grader playground, to the Board of Ed saying, yeah, we want $800,000, and that hopefully will not get approval from the Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance.
Jamie Dietz again. I'm kind of tired of going to all of these meetings. I've been to 3 Board of Ed meetings, carting around my son with me, and nothing appears to get done. We've lived in Madison. My husband grew up in Madison. He actually went to academy school growing up. And he doesn't have an attachment per se to the school, but he, just the town itself. He came back to it. We lived in Branford for a while, and he came back to Madison to raise our son here. And I'm at a loss because nothing is moving forward. I feel like everything is just, being backpedaled. We want the best for our son growing up, and if everything gets stifled, we're not going to have that. We have Guilford, which is a neighboring community right next to us. They have a beautiful community center. I know we have the surf club. I'm not saying anything about what we have. I love what we have, but I think we can even have more. That's all.
Thank you.
Dennis Grove, 141 Twilight. I attended the earlier meeting with the recommendations committee, and somebody mentioned in there that this could be a 3-year process to get to the point of actually beginning any construction or whatever. And during that time, the building would continue to deteriorate or whatever. And there would be additional costs and so on. At the same time, I know the town's costs are going up on other items. You got the library bond, you got the capital improvements and so on. And at the same time, you got state getting their fingers into the pie. They want to take away your car tax revenue. They're already decreasing, the support and everything. I don't envy you folks on what this is, but whatever it is, when we get to a referendum and there's a dollar number attached to this and people's taxes are already going up for other things, there will probably be, as Dan mentioned, an outswelling of interest in this. And I want to thank you folks for actually moving this forward, because it hadn't for a long time, and you folks have actually done that, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I really don't want to have people doing multiple things. You've already spoken twice, Catherine.
Okay. So there is an opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. If you've already spoken once, we'd be happy to hear from you again at the public comment at the end of the meeting. Well, if people haven't had a chance to talk, we should give them a chance.
Might come down there.
Hi, I'm Denise McGregor, 35 Scotland Avenue. I think the results definitely show that the town would like
a community center, and I support a community center. I think we'll all be enriched by it, and it'll be open to everybody regardless of age. And I think it's just going to be really wonderful to have a lot of new activities for the town people.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify. Yeah, I'd like to clarify the numbers. It's estimated that the renovation will cost $13 million, and for a 20-year bond on $13 million, the cost for the $400,000 average household is only going to be $85 per household per year. The balance of that is in the maintenance of the building. So you would have to add, to get to the 140, you'd have to subtract the 85 from the 140. That is what we estimate it would cost to maintain and operate the building. Now, even with that, there are other ways to maintain and operate the building. For example, if you look at the Guilford Community Center, it's operated by their Parks and Recreation Department. So there are other ways to operate and maintain this building, which would reduce that maintenance if these numbers work out. So that is some clarification for the $140 that is typically used in articles in the newspaper and so on.
Jenny Lee, 17 Bradley, and my one thought about a community center, just off the top of my head, is the positive impact it would have to the whole downtown area. And that's all the merchants, and that's it. So. It's a hot potato. It's hot potato. Where does it go now?
All done? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move on to
Number 6.
number 6, receive update and recommendation.
You skip number 7.
Number 6.
I'm sorry.
You can only correct me when I'm wrong. Receive updates and recommendations from the Ad hoc Academy School Guidance Committee. Henry.
Thanks, everybody.
Henry.
Okay. Check to this. So we met slightly beforehand in order to come up with a recommendation, and essentially we're saying that we find these results to be credible and valid and actionable and clear. And I will admit that I had some moments of trepidation in the months since we started meeting every week. On a Thursday, we did take Thanksgiving off. That the result would be 30, 30, 30, and 10. And we'd be right back where we were before. But we have a longer statement that we'll submit in writing, but I'll read the last 2 paragraphs. The results set forth in the Great Blue Report show that the majority of those polled and surveyed support the town's continued ownership of Academy School, restoration of the building as a community center, and strong opposition to the sale or development of the surrounding ball fields and parkland. The committee supports the findings of the Great Blue Report and recommends that the Board of Selectmen be guided by these findings in presenting a plan to Madison residents for vote at referendum. And that's no different from what just about everybody else has said. The one little bit of housekeeping I would say is that we stand by awaiting your instructions as to continuing the committee, unwinding it. I feel we've met our charge, but we're not going to go until we're excused. Thank you.
That brings us to item number 7, discuss and take action to end the charge of the Ad hoc Academy School Guidance Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to say that, when we started this process, it feels like 15 years ago. we started down a path. We awoke a voice in the community, and as we struggled to find a way to discern what the community could support, we charged this committee with a really big task, and that was to go out and bring us back unbiased data. And I don't know if we were just being positive or aggressive, but we thought maybe that would be about a 3-week project for you folks. But you educated us on that. I think you've done a fabulous job. I think you've given us everything that we could have hoped for. I'm grateful for the work you did. I know that you did meet every week, and then you formed subcommittees off of that and met even more frequently than that. So, once again, this community runs on volunteers, and these folks are really the shining example of what we can do when we all work together. So I want to say thank you very much for the work you've done. I'm very happy.
Myself and on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I'd like to thank the committee very much for everything that they did. I know it was a lot of work, and you're very diligent. I appreciate that.
Tom, as the liaison from the Board of Selectmen to this committee, I had a chance to attend almost every meeting, and I think the applause that we've given them is well justified. The committee members conducted themselves civilly, even though they always didn't agree on things. And I think this has been a key step in the process of building a consensus about what to do with this building. And so I think I salute all the members of the committee and their very patient chairman, Henry Griggs, who managed to keep everybody pulling together. You've done a real community service, and I think this was a wonderful process that we set up, and you deserve our thanks for carrying this out.
I echo everything that Al and Bruce said. Thank you very much. Oh, excuse me. No, not you. Oh, yes. I apologize. Mr. First Selection.
Any other comments, discussion?
Well, I guess I have a question to my fellow selectmen here. I mean, if we're talking about sort of the end of this committee, do we have ideas of whether it really should end, or whether there's, what are the next steps, and are we going to need more volunteers to the exact point that we just finished talking about? Is there a creative thing, a creative idea that we can be doing here, whether it's exploring in more detail on the design side of the community center and starting to take it down to that level? Is it a design and development committee? Is it I don't know, but
I think that's for us to discuss. In the meantime, the charge that we gave them, they've executed, and so it's time to end this committee and talk about what the next committee should do.
And I do believe our work is just really beginning now, right?
There's still hopeful.
Henry's already volunteered to head up the next committee.
You may go get some sleep first.
Does he know he's No, he does not know. It's a secret. Don't tell him.
All right, any other discussion in the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks again. Number 8, presentation from the Beach and Rec Commission of the proposed parking lot management system. I think we have several people from Beach and Rec. Pam and Susan. Shane.
He's got it.
You know what, while you're setting up, why don't you go to number 9? That's kind of good. That's what I just said. Okay. We're gonna jump ahead to number 9 and then come back to number 8. Number 9 is discuss and take action to approve a donation from the Strong Center Board to the Lacrosse Memorial Rocket Strong Field. So moved.
Second.
You want to talk about it?
Oh, Shane's here too, but.
Okay. Yeah, Shane, you want to tell us about it? About the stone work?
Sure.
Cross coaches.
Shane Corporuta, 23 Alex Drive. Earlier this year, Tom and I had spoke. We have proposed at the new Strong Center. We have a lot of support down there around football. We wanted to expand that support to some of the other sports in town. We have two legends that have supported lacrosse in this town. Frank Barron, who was both a football and lacrosse coach, has over 500 career wins as a Hall of Fame lacrosse coach for Connecticut. We'd like, and then Pat McCahill was the original coach who started the high school program, lacrosse program. We would like to mirror what we did for Philippone and Ciotti and have a plaque within stones down at the Strong Center, remembering or honoring both of them. And so that was the proposal. We've raised the funds. We've worked with the town. We have the funds. We've worked with the town and Joe Dickinson and his group for the design. That's been submitted to Scott for the review, and I believe that's the proposal that's here today.
Great, yep, thank you. And that's one of the point I wanted to make is it's all private funds that they raised to pay for this. So our discussion tonight is to accept the gift.
Is there a dollar amount that we need to accept?
5,000.
Okay.
Am I right, Shane? 5,000?
Yeah, slightly over, but yes.
Lauren, do we need to amend the?
So I'll motion, if one of you could amend the motion to include the dollar amount.
Okay. So I'll read the motion. Discuss and take action to approve a donation of over $5,000 from the Strong Center Board for the Lacrosse Memorial Rocket Strong Field.
Second.
Okay.
Tom, I just have a question. I understand we're voting to accept the donation, and I'm all for that. Are we somehow also approving what is being done? Is that our job?
No, we're not. We're just approving the donation.
Okay.
We're showing where it's to be placed, which is on the team room side of the McIntyre building, which is mirror to the team room on the Anderson field house. So they're bracketing both ends of the plaza.
It looks terrific to me. I'm not belly aching. I'm trying to understand, is there a town entity that is overseeing what is being done here? Was this part of the original approval?
This is an add-on that from the original lacrosse wasn't included at the other end, and we're just trying to.
So incrementally, we have approved donations of the plaza.
Yeah.
And we didn't approve the design, we just approved the donation. Again, that was brought to the people, and they kind of sort of through. So the way things have been working is everything the town's not paying for is going through regional. What the town is paying for is improvements, the two buildings, for instance. But again, those were designed and designed for this price.
Town engineering doesn't need to be involved at all?
They may be moving the rock.
There
Highway
you go.
Highway they moved the one that has on the Anderson building, as well as New Oak with the tool garden. They helped. Because I think Shane's working with the country club to find a
Clearly. Yeah. There's no we have no zoning implications here. Everything's
it's
already
going to be a garden
pre-approved.
around it.
All the permitting has been done.
Yeah.
So Scott, any further alterations or changes have to be
Fire
approved by
marshal
your
signs off on the rock being inflammable.
We're good.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, back to number 8. Presentation of Beach and Rec about the proposed parking lot management system. These are going to get us through this in like 2 minutes.
No pressure.
Can I publish the HDMI source work? Imagine if you're here.
Don't help them. Oh, now you want me to go home? Yeah.
The HDMI's not working.
Yeah, you have to plug it into the wall. Just telling you.
Apparently, this is actually.
You guys think you're almost there?
Keep going.
Okay, all right. Number 10, discuss a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to modify the language of Chapter 9 floodplain management ordinance. So moved?
Second.
So we have a couple people here from, we have.
Yes, good evening, Ron Clark from the Planning and Zoning Commission. What I'd like to do is have Dave Anderson address it, but the background is simply that the Planning and Zoning Commission has been doing some homework.
I'm not going to let you get away without hearing.
Thank you, Gus, I appreciate that.
He actually prefers it.
Ron Clark, Planning and Zoning Commission. The P&Z has been doing some work over the past few months, quite frankly, with the issues created primarily by sea level rise, trying to proactively find ways that we can make our zoning regulations compatible and to encourage people to take steps, not necessarily immediately, but over time to stay ahead of the inevitable rise in sea level as it's predicted at by the state and the federal government. It's not for us alone, however. It's not all planning and zoning relates to these things. And with that in mind, Dave and I penned a letter to you because it does cover, well, all disciplines from health to fire to everything else, including ordinances. So I'd like to hand the microphone over to Dave, who can maybe go into a little more detail. Thank you.
I doubt it.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I have handouts if you guys want any, but I'll try to go through this relatively quickly. So, as Ron mentioned, the Planning and Zoning Commission is working on several initiatives related to coastal resiliency. And we're basing a lot of our actions out of the Town of Madison Coastal Resilience Plan that was adopted in 2016. And if you look at the recommended actions in that plan, there's two actions related to the floodplain management regulation. One is to adopt freeboard that exceeds the state recommended 1 foot, and one is to expand the substantial improvement definition to include improvements made over a period of 5 or 10 years. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. So in general, the floodplain management is an ordinance of the town, so you guys are in charge of it, and it basically governs construction activity within the floodplain. And so there's different parameters for how high above mean sea level you need to be at. So if you have a house that's currently does not comply with the FEMA regulations, and you want to improve it to over 50% of the market value of the structure, you have to come into compliance with the FEMA regulations. So you have to raise your house.
It's actually the appraised value by the town.
Yeah, the market value, yeah, appraised value.
Appraised value.
Yep.
It's based on the town's appraisal.
The town's, excuse me. Appraised or assessed?
Appraised.
Okay, yeah, so the market.
Yeah.
Okay. In any case, so substantial improvement, our definition now would allow you to do 49.9% improvement over the course of a year. Once you complete that project, you could let a year pass and you could do another 49.9% that following period. So there's basically a way around improving your structure to become more flood resistant. And so many towns have what they call look-back periods, where that cumulative improvement is looked at over a 5-year period. So you can't do multiple projects and stay at 49.9%. So basically what it does is it encourages people to try to bring their houses into FEMA compliance, which then protects their structure, but also adjacent structures. And so one of the recommendations that was in the Coastal Resilience Plan is to adopt that 5-year look-back period. The other recommendation is to consider requiring freeboard, which is if the FEMA regulations would require you to build 13 feet above mean sea level, 2 feet of freeboard would say you should build to 15 feet. And what that does is basically provides additional protection for those structures. Recently, after 2016, the state building code actually requires 1 foot of freeboard, so we're already not in compliance with the state building code. And there was a public act passed last year out of the state. It's Public Act 18-82, and it requires municipalities to plan for 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. and that's required for planning activities like plans of conservation and development, hazard mitigation plans. But I also think it's appropriate when we're looking at our floodplain management regulations, if we assume that seas are going to be 20 inches or 2 feet higher by 2050, I think it's prudent for us to look towards our regulations and maybe encouraging people to build to those standards now. So that's the extent of kind of the dialogue that the Planning and Zoning Commission had on it. I think what we're asking you guys to do is just be aware that this is something hanging out there that I think you're going to want to start taking action towards. With any ordinance, you're going to want, have a public hearing and have public input because there is the potential that this requires a homeowner to raise their structure earlier than anticipated or a foot higher than anticipated, and so there should be some public dialogue around that. I'm happy to assist you as I can. I know that the town engineer has been looking at the floodplain management ordinance now. I'm not sure where he stands regarding these particular items. But I know that he's kind of actively looking at this as well. So,
the only thing I'd like to mention is that I'm not positive, I'm pretty sure that there's no other town around here that has only a 1-year look back.
that's my understanding. I can't point to all the towns.
I know Milford has 10, Guilford has 5. I'm not sure what Clinton's is, but we're not blazing any trails here. We're kind of catching up with people.
Correct.
Correct.
Is there a timeline?
I appreciate you raising this issue, and I think that...
Raising it by 2 feet out.
At least 2 feet. Both feet at once. That's true. I think before this Board of Selectmen or this community takes any action on this, Tom and I have been talking about a public information session in which we invite some experts to help educate us in this community about coastal resiliency, sea level rise, and what lies ahead. And so, Tom, I'd like to continue to urge us to get that scheduled, because I think we as a community need to learn a lot more about this. We appreciate the heads up, and I think it's time for us to put this on our plate.
I know anything that the selectmen do, I can speak for the P&Z, we'd support, try and help. So, and I'm sure all the land use agencies and all the town agencies feel the same way.
Is there a particular timeline that we need to be addressing this
No,
ordinance change?
I think what we want to do is we want to draft some language to make the change to the ordinance, and then like Dave said, we're going to have public hearings and, kind of let people understand. And all those people who want to catch their last 1 year.
Right. But there's no sense of urgency, I guess, it has to happen in the next 3 months.
No, there's no timeline other than I think it's responsible to advance it forward.
Dave, is that coastal resiliency plan online?
Yes, it is online. You can get it right off the town website.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay,
Are you ready?
we're finally ready.
We're good now.
Let's go to square two. Everybody, this is Jason from Complus Data. We have been working with him to develop a parking management system for the town beaches and parks. And Jason's here from Terrytown, right? New York, so he's got a bit of a drive. But what we wanted to try to do is streamline our permit process for the summer, going online, and we've come up with hopefully a good seamless solution, and wanted Jason to go over it, to explain it to you, get questions from you, because we're going to be going back to the commission for our first meeting, and then come back to you your morning meeting in February, because we meet Tuesday. So Jason, you want to go through this permit process for us?
Thanks, Seth. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to give you a very high-level view of how this would operate from the customer's standpoint and also from the town standpoint. Like Scott had mentioned, we're trying to streamline the process. We want to make it easier for everybody. Your residents, so they're automatically enrolled into our system, so they can just go online and purchase their permit. They don't have to actually come down and get the physical permit handed to them or mailed to them. And also your data partners, they would just log on to our website, purchase their permit, and all that information is relayed to our handheld to the enforcement officer in real time. So basically, it's going to streamline the whole process. So what I want to show you is our website. It's buymypermit.com. So you would have your own unique domain. It would be buymypermit.com/Madison, where your residents can log on and actually purchase their permits. So all they would do is click here, purchase permit. And what I didn't touch on is all of your residents, we would have all of your information provided from Scott from your previous vendor. So basically, they would be pre-programmed into our system, so they wouldn't actually have to do anything. They would just get a letter in the mail that says, this is your account number, log on and purchase your permit this way. All they would do is type in their account number, their last name, you hit continue.
You have to use that last name?
It's a long last name. As you can see, we have all that information already on file in our back office software. So you can see it pulls up my name, my address, it pulls all my information, my contact information here, email address. It's also going to give me an option to select which permit I want to purchase. We would program all these permits into the system, so you would have your senior permits, your resident permits, daily permits, and any other permit that you guys would have you'd be using. So they would select which one they want to purchase. Again, we would make it so you can only purchase what they're eligible to purchase. So you're not giving everybody any resident or senior permit for a lot cheaper. You could even do it for lot and street. And then you can see here, it has all of my vehicle information already on file. So it's a New York plate. The plate number is DMS 2014. It's a Subaru Forester, and it's going to ask me for an expiration date. You hit continue. And then it's going to basically ask you for payment information. So this is determined by you guys. You would give us your prices for your permits, what you want to charge, and then they would purchase them online. Give them the option to pay by credit card. And then again, just basic credit card information. We don't store any of this information. It's has to be typed in every time. This is just stored because it's my computer.
Is that your credit card?
This is not my actual credit card. So no pictures, please.
It's a quick question. You said if you want to use a credit card, you can click here. Is there any other way to pay online?
Yes, you can also use PayPal to make your payment as well. So through PayPal, you can do things like e-checks, use a check to make your payment. So we also offer that.
Not Apple Pay?
Not Apple Pay.
Is there a premium for using a credit card?
So there is a fee. It's paid by the end user. So it's either 3.95% or $1. That's just regular credit card processing fees that we have to cover.
If you have an out-of-state leased business card, what do you do?
So we would have your information from Scott. You said we were going to have all the information for their for the out-of-state
Because every year
vehicles.
I have to go in and write Scott and stuff.
So there may be some sort of verification that needs to happen for unique instances like that. But for the most part, it's going to be a seamless process where you're not going to have to actually come down and visit. It could be something that you could even provide it online. So you could provide a picture of your information, your leased vehicle information, and then it submits in and somebody in the back office has to just verify it. So you don't actually have to come down, you can just submit it online.
Does this produce a cost savings to the town, or does it cost the town?
So we figure it's going to save the town a lot of money because you're not actually purchasing the physical permits anymore. Those go out the window. Everything is digital now. So there's no physical permits. There'll probably be some revenue generated from the from parking tickets as well. So it would be cost saving, in my opinion.
And less staff, obviously, right? Less gate staff.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that Scott's staffing request for this upcoming year reflects this being implemented.
Correct.
So he's reducing his summer staff at the surf club.
Yep.
Could you elaborate on from the resident standpoint, they're not going to be receiving a permit.
Mm-hmm.
So could you elaborate on how they're going to be, the vehicle's going to be checked?
How they don't? Yeah, that's actually the next step. I'll show you that right after this. So once they purchase the permit, you would hit continue. No, I don't want to save that. And you would receive a confirmation email. Basically says your transaction has been approved, here's your verification code, and so on. What then happens in our back office, it's going to update our system that says this person now has a permit, a resident permit, and they're eligible to park in whatever lots that you guys want them to be eligible to park in. So then what happens is, these are the handheld units that the enforcement officers would be carrying around, and license plates, just so you can see what it looks like. The officer would then, this is what I'm looking at on my screen down here. The officer would then log into the enforcement device, the handheld, and as they're walking through the lot, they hit this fancy LPR button, which is license plate recognition. It's basically a camera that registers what's on the license plate. It's going to read it. It's going to say that this person does not have a permit. It's a scoff hit. Right now it's saying that they don't have a permit to be parked in that lot, so the officer will go to issue them a parking ticket. So then if the officer goes to the next car, and this is that permit that I just purchased online, they hit LPR again, scan the license plate, and they're going to get a pop-up down here that says this plate has a permit to be parked there, so they know to move on to the next vehicle. So that's how they know who has it. With the daily permits, when a visitor comes down to park in the lot, there would be signage up on the lot that says visit this webpage to purchase your permit, or you could also go down to the beach club and purchase a permit in person as well if you don't have a smartphone. All that information, again, updates in real time, so the officer knows as they're walking around who has a permit and who doesn't have a permit. So that's how they register who has the permits.
The other thing is, if somebody comes in and buys a couple of hours of parking and is on the beach and decides they want to stay, from the beach, they can just add their parking, right?
Yep, they could just go back onto the website and add a couple more hours, or another full day, whatever they want to add.
Tom, how do we enforce the payment of the fine?
We have a boot that we're going to put on
the car.
Oh, boot.
So I'll show you that too. So what happens is, we'll go back to the one that doesn't have the permit. If they scan this, they're going to get this pop-up again that says they don't have a permit to be parked there. And yeah, this person has a lot of parking tickets. It's showing that they have 7 open tickets for $355. So if you did want to boot, you could, enforce that there. You don't have to though. Then what they would do is the officer would enter in all the information about the violation. So you can see that it pulls up the state, it pulls up the plate. So they just enter in a couple required fields. Again, these fields are customizable to you guys. You don't have to have these. These are just this is just a program that we have in there, stock basically. They select the location. They select the make of the vehicle, the body, then the violation. Again, these are provided by you guys. We would just program these into the handheld. So you would have different violations, different fine amounts. I know we had talked about in the beginning, because this is a new change, doing a warning ticket for the first time offense, just to kind of get residents used to the program.
And that can be tailored if we wanted to issue out more than the one warning, like if we were starting the season of just to keep people, oh, I gotta get.
Yeah. The first year we're gonna find our way through, exactly how we make it work. So we don't want it to be onerous. The whole purpose of this is not to be onerous on the citizens of Madison, but to make people who are visiting more accountable for their parking fees. That's really what we're trying to do.
I wanted to ask the cost of a device and the cost of an officer running around the parking lot and the loss of jobs for
Kathy,
summer kids.
this is not a question and answer for you.
We can't ask how much it costs?
No. He'll go through a lot of stuff, but a lot of this is going to have to come from our conversations.
So they basically enter in the violation number. There's also a camera built into these devices, so you hit camera and you can actually take a picture of the violation. This attaches in real time to our to the back office software. So if the person's parked on the line, you could actually take a picture of them parked on the line. So there's proof that the violation was issued correctly. And then all you do, you hit the print button, and it prints the violation right out of the back of the unit. And this is what the officer would put on the car. So they just place this on the vehicle, and it has payment information, where you can mail it to make payment, where you can go online to make payment, how you can dispute the ticket, what the violation amount is, stuff like that. Basic information about the violation. The next thing in the presentation is how a resident or somebody who received a ticket would actually make their payment. There is a hosted website called parkingticketpayment.com. Back to here. So basically what they would do is they'd say, I'd like to pay my parking ticket. They could also view their parking ticket, so they can actually view an image of the ticket that was placed in their vehicle and any of those pictures that were taken at the time of the issuance, or they could also appeal their ticket online. When you appeal it online, basically what that's going to do is it's going to send over to whoever's in charge of appeals. They can review it all, so nobody has to come down and do it in person, and then they can send a response right back to the person who received the ticket. So they click, I would like to pay my ticket. Let's just pull up the ticket number here. Oops. Sorry. That's my cat Bob.
Scott, have you considered as an option so that early season, first time resident who gets the ticket, giving them the option to say, I'd like to pay my ticket by buying my season's pass?
We haven't gotten that granular yet with the operation of the system. The one thing that we want to make sure is that it's not onerous for people in town, that we're making it as easy as possible. For instance, we've had situations where people on Memorial Day weekend drive down and forgot to get their pass. They get there and they can't buy a season pass there.
So with this
at this point, with this, you could just drive in and do it right there.
I've never done that.
So this is, what we're looking at now is the software that will be used in the back end, so by Scott and his team, basically. This is how you manage all of those parking tickets. You can query and see how many tickets each person has. Let's see. I just want to pull the ticket number so I can make the payment for you guys.
You can just pay us directly here.
994. So, if I'm the end user, I log on to this parkingticketpayment.com. I type in my ticket number. I type in my license plate. It's right here. ABC 1234. Oh. Was it 994? Sorry. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, California.
Okay. So now you can see the ticket that was issued to you. You're given the option to either pay all of your tickets or individual tickets. So if you have multiple tickets on your license plate, you can pay all 3 of them, all 4 of them, or you can select to pay just one at a time. That's up to the town to make the decision. They would hit continue. There is a service fee to pay the tickets online. That's, again, for credit card processing fees. It's a $3.50 fee to pay the ticket. If there was, it's always a $3.50 fee. So again, you have the option to pay by credit card, or you could pay with PayPal again as well. You hit pay by credit card. Again, you just type in all of your information, standard credit card information. Not my real one. Hit continue. And the nice thing about this is all this information updates in real time. So I would receive an email that basically has my confirmation number. It basically acts as your receipt. And then if I go back into Fast Track, our software, and I query that plate again, the ticket is now paid. Also has an audit trail for everybody in the back office. You can see everything that's ever happened on this ticket. There's a photo on file, that it was appealed, ticket was paid, it was a web payment. Basically, it gives the town an audit trail. So if there was any disputes, the person could go in and actually, you could print out a receipt for them or an audit trail of the entire life cycle of the ticket. That is a very, very high level of how this system operates. Like Scott said in the beginning, I think the idea of this is to make it easier for the town residents and people that are coming in to visit, to purchase their permits and have it be managed in a very seamless way. So,
What if someone doesn't pay?
if someone doesn't pay their parking ticket, so part of our proposal also included registered owner name lookups. We have a connection to all 50 DMVs nationwide, so we can get registered owner information based on your criteria and send out notices and help with the collection process. So we would send out notices in the mail to say, hey, you have 2 open tickets or 1 open ticket, whatever the criteria you give us is. If they don't pay, we could actually put a hold on registrations as well. If you have repeat offenders that don't pay their tickets, that is another option as well. And again, we collect on all 50 states, so we can get out-of-state residents as well, or out-of-state violators as well.
Scott, how steep a penalty are you thinking of assessing for out-of-towners who don't pay their fee?
Well, like Tom says, we haven't dug real deep into it. Our town tickets, I believe, are $25, $20, that are for regular parking.
And do you think that is sufficient to discourage folks from enjoying our beach and then skipping paying the penalty?
We'll have to take a look at that. One of the things we did a few years ago when we first instituted the pass system after the result of the Greenwich decision was that we tried to walk a fine line between charging too much and charging too little. We compared it to Hammonasset, we compared it to other towns, and I think we're going to do the same kind of thing here. Like we know Old Lyme, Westport, Fairfield, they all use this system, so we're going to kind of learn from them on the front end. But one of the things I'd like people to understand is that there's a number of benefits to this. One of them is makes it easier for our residents to buy their parking. It allows us to have a longer season. So we always go from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We can extend our season in both directions. We can extend our day. We've had gate guards from 8:30 to 5 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock, as soon as the gate guard leaves, people flood in from out of town. Now we can, they'll still have to pay because we'll be patrolling the parking lots. So I think it'll enhance our revenues in the main. It'll make it easier for people in town, and it'll enhance our revenues because we're going to have a longer season and a longer day, and I think that's going to help a lot. And for anybody who's worried about this, it's year one. We're making a fairly dramatic change to the way we do business, but I think we're making a smarter change. I think we're going to save money. We're going to cut down on our confrontations at the gate. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that there are a lot of confrontations at the gate where the kids who were working there were being yelled at by people coming in. We don't think that's appropriate. We don't want that to continue. We think this is a good way to avoid that. So I think there's a lot of benefits. We're going to, we'll talk about it a lot more and go into a lot more detail. But we would not be doing this if it was more expensive. If that answers your question.
Can I just?
Yeah, sure.
Shanko Garuda, I'm on the Beach and Rec Commission. Besides the availability of getting access to the tickets, which I think is a huge benefit, the lack or hopefully the decrease in confrontation. If you've gone down there on a busy weekend, there are lines currently all the way back to Christie's, all the way back to, this eliminates that. Now people will go in and that validation of ticket and permit now becomes, so there's a lot of benefits to Madison residents with this proposal. I know in going through this and reviewing it, one of the things that I liked most about it was the flexibility in how we execute on the implementation of it and the ability, Ally, even to your point with adjusting fines and learning from our experience, that we can change it relatively quickly to benefit, again, the residents in town.
And Jason can probably answer it. Somebody, like Tom was just saying, goes down want to increase my time spent. How fast
Does
does
it
it
update to-
change over to get to the people that are in the lot on their handheld to verify that?
That happens in real time. So if as you can see when I made that payment online, it updates and fast track in real time. Same thing happens with the permit information. Because these are working on Verizon data plans, they're constantly connected. So as soon as I purchase more time on the website, the officer in the field has that information here. So you're not gonna lose, you could even build in grace periods if you really wanted to, if you were concerned with that, where you could say, we wanna give them, like a 10-minute grace period or something. That's all stuff that you could work out. But it does all happen in real time.
And that can go to the seasonals as well. I can buy it. You're right there, you can buy it right then and there, and you're legit.
If I don't believe in the internet, can I still get a pass?
We'll be selling them there.
So there's.
Right here.
No, at the surplus.
And we can still come to the office.
And you can still.
I can come here like I always did,
Correct.
and I can do the transaction
Or
in
you
the
can go
office,
into
or there'll be a
the
place
surf club
at the surf club.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, so it should eliminate the lines that we've had, towards Memorial Day here at Town Hall. And I don't know if we have any numbers on the number of people, the percentage of people who use smartphones, but I think most of the people that are going down there.
And if they don't, we're going to be able to help them.
And you've talked to
Some
other
quick
towns
comment.
about, other towns that are using this and they've had positive.
As far as the parking enforcement, yes.
Mhm.
And they all use these guys?
That's what we're checking.
The references we've given you, yes, they were references from, I believe, Greenwich, Fairfield, Old Line, Westport.
Yeah, those are busy weeks.
Yeah.
Just, Jason, just a point
Hang on,
of,
it's not
Gibbs
public.
Newson, Beach and Rec Commission also, just a point of clarity. We don't have to purchase, we're not making any major capital purchases here.
No, the handheld it's a lease option that
Right.
we've presented to you guys, so it would be leased for a 3-year
So it's not a
option.
major commitment that we're making for 5 years, or that we have to have this equipment.
So you could see if it works for you, and then if you did sign a new contract after the 3 years, we would upgrade all of your equipment again. So you'd be getting all brand new equipment. It wouldn't be, you wouldn't be falling behind. Any updates that we do on our software, you guys would obviously have access to it. We're constantly making changes and upgrades to our software because our clients are requesting it. So, you guys would have access to that as well.
And we have a one-year commitment and then a 2 or 3 year option out, that we can get out of it. So
Yeah, that would be something we'd have to work out in the contract, but yeah.
just to be clear, we're not, sinking both feet on cement.
Right.
I have a question. Couldn't they take a picture of the plates going in on the in and the out to make sure nobody has gone through that doesn't have a ticket, so that when the gate guards or whoever have to go through and check?
So the point of this is that we don't have to check people on the way in because we're checking them all day long by patrolling the parking lots.
I just think that takes longer, but I just wondered.
Tom, so quick comment. I think this is awesome. I'm excited. This is a big jump into the 21st century where we're embracing technology. I think it's fantastic. But on the flip side, what I do get nervous about is it is a huge change for our townspeople and the public. So have we started to think through what the communications to the public might be? I mean, this clearly is a first step, but maybe to Scott, is there a communication plan? Do we have sort of a step process of how we're going to get out to the people to make sure they know what they're doing?
We are working on that.
Yeah, that's definitely, we understand that's the most important thing going forward, other than actual implementation.
I didn't mean to state the obvious, but I'm
Yeah, no.
I think it's pretty important.
It's a big deal, yeah. One other piece to that too is, and again, this would go to, obviously, to the Board of Selectmen. Our recommendation in the implementation of what the commission has talked about is keeping year one, in terms of process, as close to what we currently have today. So we have a lot of options with, even as Tom mentioned, the season, extending time. We have the flexibility with the implementation to make those decisions as to what's going to work best. So we don't have as much change.
We can
sort of build into it.
We can
Focus on the benefits that it delivers without the change.
And I have one other question, Tom. So as you guys are thinking about this, one thing that sort of struck me with any of the fees that we're charging people, is there a way to just build in the service charge so that it's just either part of the ticket, part of the fee for whatever, so that, because I just think people are gonna end up being annoyed with that. You see a $350 charge, why can't we just build it into the price of the permit or the whatever?
So they can avoid that though, like coming in, right?
Yes, if they buy their permit in person or pay their ticket in person, there is no service fee to do that. That's just the online or over the phone option. But we do work with other towns and cities that have, built in the service fees to their ticket prices, so it is something that we are capable of doing.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys if you wanted to do it.
Courtesy.
Just one question. Tom, can I ask a question? So you're saying let's eliminate the confrontations at the gate that the young kids have had in the town. Are we outsourcing these jobs, or can the young people in town have jobs doing this in the parking lot?
You're asking the wrong person, he has no idea.
Okay, Tom, are we eliminating jobs?
We're gonna continue to hire kids in town for Beach and Rec for the summer. It's just gonna be in a different capacity.
Who are the officers you're referring to that are going to be doing this? Are they police officers?
Personnel. Just personnel. Beach and Rec personnel. He calls them officers.
I call them enforcement officers, but it can be somebody that just works for the town that can issue tickets.
Anybody else? Great. Thanks, Jason, so much.
Thank you very much.
This is kind of the, you don't have to discuss it right now, but take a look at it and give it a read and see what you think.
Yeah.
It's got to be getting as big as we're going to purpose.
Okay, one more question.
I did have one more question on there.
Yes.
What about, I didn't see the option there, but maybe it's there for families with 2 vehicles or one?
Yeah, there's multiple vehicles. You can have multiple vehicles registered under the same account. So if you had, yeah, you could do multiple bids, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Scott, you got anything else you want? That's it. Thank you. Number 11, discuss and take action to approve accepting a community connectivity grant in the amount of $400,000 and to authorize the first selectman to sign the same. So moved. Second. Dave, you want?
Yes, we actually applied for this grant a year and a half ago. I just looked at it today, and they didn't fund us in the first round, but offered up some additional funding. So part of the grant was asked that accommodations be considered for low-income residents. So actually, the town.
Hey, folks, can you guys keep it down, please?
With Tom input, Johnny Anako and I put together an application to extend the sidewalk from Concord Meadows down to the intersection of Route 79 and Route 1, and with a small spur over also to the senior center, just to try to get those populations to be able to get downtown in a safe manner. So we were funded that, just found out last week that we were granted that opportunity. So, Bill, and there's no matching requirement, the state just reminded me. So. It was a good opportunity. So, I think our part of the reason we started that bike ped committee was to explore more opportunities like this. So we actually submitted this long before that committee got started, but hopefully that committee's work will make us even more competitive for future grants like this.
Yeah, so over the course of the next couple of years, we'll actually be adding sidewalks along where Dave said on Woodland Avenue and down 79. And next summer, we have a project to add sidewalks on Bradley Road. So, and again, we're identifying a population that is going to benefit from it, because Vista has their headquarters on Bradley Road. And, yeah, and that's a dangerous spot for them. So we're going to do a couple of traffic things there, make a three-way stop at that intersection, but also I think it's going to make it safer for everybody in town.
Love it. Dave, what percentage of the sidewalk construction does this grant cover?
It's projected to cover 100% of the construction. So we hope
they told us.
Yeah.
And I think our advisory committee on pedestrian bicycle safety is supportive of this.
Well, they didn't have any input into it. I mentioned a year and a half ago is when we submitted this grant application. I just found out about that we were awarded it last week, so I haven't been able to talk to them directly about it. But in general, my conversations, yes, they do support it.
Thank you.
I don't think so. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number 12, discuss and take action to approve a line item transfer request from the Facilities Department in the amount of $6,874.56.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 13, discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation request from the risk manager in the amount of $25,000 to fund insurance increases due to separate coverage for the Rockland Preserve Bike Trail.
So moved. Second.
Lauren, do you want to say anything about it?
Do you guys have any questions? Essentially, this is just funding to pay the overages that we have for the current fiscal year for the risk management account for the LAC. Because KERMA would not cover the Rockland Park area, we had to carve it out of the KERMA policy, give it its own policy. And between that and the other endorsements that we've paid so far this year to add on to vehicles and things of that nature, we're running a deficit right now of about $18,000. I have an additional invoice from our insurance broker for $2,700, so I'm asking for $25,000 to cover any future endorsements that might come between now and the end of this fiscal year. But it is budgeted properly for next year, so we should not run into this again.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thanks, Lauren. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 14, discuss and take action to approve a funding request from the Facilities Department for the Police Department Future Planning Project to fund the preliminary design phase. The total amount requested is $6,550 from the Planning Reserve Fund.
So moved. Second.
I don't even know who to ask about this. Joe?
So what we're doing is I've been working with Bill McMinn and Del Simmons, so our building hasn't been updated in 20 years since it was built. And the needs that we now have are much different than those that we had 20 years ago. So our idea is to get some plans together and then present things to the CIP for consideration over the next 3 to 5 years.
Great. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 15, discuss and take action to approve the appointment of Tony West as an alternate to the Ad hoc Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Discuss and take action to approve the appointment of another Tony Davis, as an alternate to the Ad hoc Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, discuss bill patch to establish a tax deferment program for federal shutdown affected employees.
So, Tom, I'm going to move to table this agenda item, given that the federal government is back up and running. I think we can table this until such time as we feel that it's going to be needed, but presumably everybody's back on the payroll and should be getting into a good place. So.
Great.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 18, update on the strategic planning process. That's why Lauren left.
She ran away.
We'll go to 19, senior citizens comment.
Well, Tom, I'd like to start a discussion on 18. Earlier this evening, we received a report regarding Academy, and I think we need to, at least among the 5 of us, we need to figure out how we're going to fold all of this together and integrate all of the many planning processes that are currently going on. I'm not here pitching anything especially. I think we, the 5 of us up front here, need to figure out how we're going to come up with an integrated strategic plan that not only includes what we learned tonight about Academy, but all the other things going on. So I think we need to have that discussion. If not tonight, we need to have it very, very soon.
Okay, I don't disagree at all.
Yeah. I don't know that we should have this discussion tonight, but my vision is we need to fold all of our many planning processes together in one strategic plan, and that's what we take to the public. Otherwise, we're continuing the action that we've probably been doing for the last 200 years of bringing forward one project at a time, sort of disconnected and in isolation from everything else that's going on. And so I think that's the general vision. I imagine all 5 of us share that, but now we got to get to the nitty gritty of how we're going to do this. And I think the momentum that's come from this academy study kind of begs us now to start answering the question, well, what do we do with this? How does this fit into how we're going to do planning for the future?
Well, I think not only rolling it into one plan, but also having sort of that timeline so that, you know, the taxpayers are expecting. I think we've heard several folks suggest that they're interested in kind of when things are going to happen. So how do we get to that sort of calendar of timelines and dates? I think is important.
Well, my understanding though is that we do have, or we are in the process of having at least a draft for discussion. Is that, where does that stand?
I think Glenn talked with Jacqueline yesterday? Today.
So on Friday late afternoon, after we had closed, Tom and I received an email with an updated draft, red line copy of all the comments that were received from the internal stakeholders to that initial draft. I had a couple questions on it, so I tried to reach out to Jacqueline today and I did not hear back from her. So I'm hoping to speak with her tomorrow so that I can just clarify a few points before I send it to all 33 stakeholders again as a working document. As far as management partners goes, this is pretty much the end of their work with us. So I just would like to tie up the loose ends with Jacqueline before I get everything out to all of you, so that if there are questions, we can ask her before we kind of sever that relationship with them. And then going forward, you guys would have to decide how many more workshops we need to conduct, both with the internal stakeholders and then public workshops to present your actual draft document. And this part of, you know, the town's overall plan that we're calling the strategic plan is really centered around what services do we want to offer. And in essence, once Madison reaches the stage that we feel is perfection, what will be the services that we offer under this perfect model?
Lauren, was there an expectation with management partners of them coming back and presenting sort of their final product to us? And kind of tying it up in a bow?
They're certainly open to it, but it was not part of what we contracted with them. Okay. So it would be, you know, we would have to extend that contract and kind of figure out how we would want them to present it, and I'm sure that there would be a monetary value associated with that as well.
I think we want to take a look at what we have first as far as the draft is concerned, and
I agree.
You know.
And I would suggest just as a matter of process that, you know, we sort of opened the doors, we invited a lot of the internal or all of the internal stakeholders in for their input. I think we probably need to huddle around the draft, make sure that we're all on the same page, and develop to the point where we're ready to reopen the doors and invite the larger community in to look at it. And I agree, I think this is something that we need to get moving quickly. I think as a goal, we should have it in presentable form to the community by the end of the fiscal year, so that it can be incorporated into the financial planning for the next budget year. So
June 30th.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that. Laura, you gave us a very good description of where we are right now. I think I need to highlight the fact that the management partner strategic plan that we're working on is organized around programs and services. It's not organized around facility. And so I think we selectmen need to come up with what is our strategic plan for the facilities in town? And how does what we learned about the public's interest in what to do with Academy, how do we integrate all of that in what we're doing? I know, Tom, at one point you were hopeful of having a referendum in May on this, and I sense we all recognize that's not possible at this point.
Never say never, Al.
Okay, well, I'm dubious. But I guess the five of us need to not only focus on the programs and services, but also on the facilities issues which are facing us, and how are we going to develop our roadmap for sorting through all of that.
So what are the suggested next steps? I mean, would it be a working session, maybe with the five of us as a starting point?
I think, yeah, with the red line draft, I think we need to find some time for the five of us to meet and have a workshop where we're discussing how we want to polish it up and get it ready to, you know, to roll it out for the larger public comment.
And I think you know, you're right, Al, but I think the programs and services, once we look at that and we know, I mean, that's then we're gonna have to look at the facilities, because a lot of the programs and services are going to require either rehab or perhaps new facility. I mean, a lot of it is infrastructure, does involve infrastructure, not just adding programs and services.
And layer on that, the tri-board work that they're doing on
Well, and
the
that's
larger
what-
Board of
yeah.
Ed, right? That's sort of all
Right.
wrapped into all of this, which is gonna make it even easier.
Well, Bruce, I like your suggestion. I think this Board of Selectmen needs a working session on almost how do we plan for planning?
Right. It was my suggestion. Scott gets credit.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
I have a comment on that.
Yeah.
John Michael Parker, 36B Wall Street. People are doing that before. In the context of the data before, I'm wondering, Dan made in answering a question, he referenced motive behind why some people voted a certain way. I don't know if there was scientific data collected around that motive. He was suggesting maybe there was tax implications that drove people or wanting public use, and I would wonder if the selectmen could take that into account when you're figuring out strategic planning, because those motives could actually offer maybe more insight than just what that shows. And then furthermore, wondering if the selectmen are thinking about using a similar polling apparatus to get town opinion in the context of a school board plan or wherever else we might go with some other big decisions. It seems like this was a pretty good process that gave us some good information, and so if we need to, that might be another thing to consider as we pull together an overall plan.
And the tri-board working committee is talking about polling, you know, based on the results of this. You know, we haven't committed to it, but, you know, there certainly is a good possibility that we will use some polling. I mean, we've had some public sessions, but the polling offers you a lot, you know, public sessions are people who want to correct specifically. Right. Polling is much more, you know, scientific, if you want, so.
Thank you.
I have a question as well.
We're back to.
We're
to citizens' comments anyway.
Citizens' comments. So, won't be questions, but comments.
It's,
Yes, I'd like with the strategic plan to take into account how much energy happens and ahead of building a building, instead of having someone design a building and then we have to place Woody or someone else on the energy committee to make them change all their plans because it was idiotic. And I'm using the library as an example. I think you have to plan for the energy for the lifetime of the building. Our costs are outrageous, and we've had this very nice mild winter, and I hear already that Polson and, did I do something?
Nope.
Polson and Daniel Hand have worse energy usage than before, but because of the government shutdown, I can't check the data on Portfolio Manager because it's on the EPA website. So otherwise I'd give you the data right now. So I apologize.
Gus Horvath, 34 Aylesbury Circle. Two things on Academy and on the floodplain and coastal resiliency. On Academy, Scott asked where do you start? And I would suggest, having been on half a dozen building committees over the years, that we now have a general direction in which to go. And in order to get somewhere, you have to know where you're starting. And I would suggest that the Board of Selectmen consider taking some money from the planning reserve and doing an architectural and engineering study of the building to find out what in God's name we have there, because we really don't know. So in order to figure where we're going to go, we have to find out where are we, and you know what's going to take to prepare that building for future use. So I would strongly urge you to talk to whoever you think is appropriate and consider taking some of the planning money and doing a architectural and engineering study of the building for openers. And number two, on the issues that the town planner talked about on the coastal resiliency and floodplain management, if you look at the outline from the 2016 coastal resiliency study, there's 3 or 4 pages of actions to review, to initiate, and they actually start out with a date of 2016, so we're kind of 2 or 3 years behind the schedule that's in the plan. And I think one of the reasons that happens is because a lot of the stuff is further up. And there's always that tendency to kick things down the street when we don't want to face the issues now. The state statutes allow towns with less than 55,000 residents to have the Board of Selectmen as their flood management organization. The town of Madison already has one. We have a flood and erosion control board. It has 1 member because it has not been active for many, many years. And as I mentioned to you in the November meeting, I suggest that you reactivate that committee and have them coordinate all of the issues that are in here. And I would volunteer to serve on that committee. But I think the first step is to get somebody in charge of that. Now, Milford has done that, and they've been active in this for years, since 2008. And they've actually bought properties using some federal funds because the coastal resiliency plan says there's no hope for this property because it's going to be inundated, and maybe you can raise the building to 14 or 15 feet, but you ain't going to have no septic treatment plant in the ground because it's inundated. The town of Old Saybrook is in the process right now of implementing this plan, and they're doing an exhaustive study of where to start and when to do it. They have decided to accept the state mandate that the Board of Selectmen is going to be their flood and erosion control committee. I do not recommend that. I think we need something as a standalone. And again, if you do reactivate that committee, I would suggest that you fund it with some money from the planning reserve so they can start looking at what we're going to implement and when.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks,
With respect to Academy, I wasn't trying to hog the floor before, but I thought it would have been important to make a few points when folks were here in the room regarding the survey. With respect to, I feel, with all due respect, I feel like we've lost about 6 months here when I listen to how you're talking about this in terms of what are the next steps in the strategic planning process. We have known for months and months, for all of calendar 2018, that Academy was a high priority project. We've put things in motion. You put things in motion. Probably the only thing that Tom Banish and I agreed on was the fact that something had to happen sooner rather than later with Academy. We've talked about the condition of this building. We've talked about whether it could even make it through another winter. And now we're sitting here and you, in a blink, sunset the committee, the Academy Guidance Committee, and we're going to sort of meander through and kind of talk about what the next steps are. I believe that your board has made a commitment to the public to bring this to referendum. Not a commitment to fold it into the Strategic Planning Commission. If it gets sucked up into that committee and that process, this will not go to referendum for a very long time. And if it gets sucked up into that committee and that process, Academy will sink under the weight of $100 to $150 million ask for the schools and everything else going on in town. So, that's one point. At the meeting before yours, at the meeting of the Academy Guidance Committee, I suggested that we pause before we sunset. And I recommended to our committee, and I recommended to several of you on the board independently, and spoke to you independently, that you take just a little bit of time to consider whether you want to sunset the committee, or could you expand the charge to include a couple of next steps. Next steps that might help inform your process, not tell the Board of Selectmen what to do, but might help move this along so that we don't lose 6 months to a year on Academy. And the suggestion that I made was that the charge could be expanded to include just 2 things. One, and Gus will like this, resurrecting the Centerbrook Architects agreement from 2016, the purpose of which was to do an assessment, a concept plan, and cost estimates for the building, to turn it into a cultural arts center. But the design of the cultural arts center is exactly the design that our committee proposed for the community center. And the second is to do a deep dive and explore some funding sources. When we put together estimates with Colliers for the various community options, we noted that the $14 million for the community center is a number that might come significantly lower with historic tax credits and other funding sources. Our committee didn't have the time to explore the historic tax credits and the funding sources. We were trying to make a year-end poll and survey because we were under the very strong impression and direction from your board, and especially from our first selectman, that this needed to get to referendum. But a responsible next step would be to explore funding sources here. We know the tax credits can make a significant difference. We also know that federal and state grants could make a difference. I know everybody says there's none around, but we haven't explored that. We also know that there are philanthropic grants and funding sources. Daniel Hand was a pretty progressive guy. There may be sources here that would, that at least need to be explored. We've never even looked into a capital campaign, and the libraries had a very active public campaign going to raise funds, which is what? They're up in the millions now for assisting in the expansion of the library. I was disappointed that our committee was sunsetted without any discussion of the value of the committee to some interim steps, not as a building committee, because I get we aren't a building committee, but interim steps to move this along with the possibility of coming up with a plan and a number that you could bring to referendum in May. So I'm a little surprised that there is this what should we do next kind of thing. Haven't you promised that you were going to bring this to referendum? And you wanted a directional survey, and you got a directional survey. We're all kind of surprised how directional this survey came out. And we're surprised that the phone poll results came out the same as the online survey results. And that overall, people said we want a community center, we want to keep it, and we don't want to touch the land. So, excuse if there's any, excuse the tone of my voice, but I really think that the public, at a minimum, needs to know that this is going to be moved along and is not going to be part of a 6-month to a year strategic planning process. And then finally, if this building is going to sit there, not only through the rest of this winter, but through another winter, I mean, 2021 would be the earliest you're actually doing anything on it. I'd like to know if there's any place in the CIP or in any budget for putting a roof on this building, shoring up the windows, and maybe doing the remediation. That might be something like a $2 to $3 million ask, but at least it's an indication that you're committed to preserving this building and retaining this asset so that it doesn't deteriorate and make the decision for us.
Dick Passero, 287 Legend Hill. I have just one question. When I leave meetings like this and go home, inevitably I'll run into friends who will ask me what happened. Can you tell me what happened? What do I tell them? We had a great report. What's the next step? Is the next step your working session for Academy? Is that what I tell them, that the information is in now and that you will include that in your next working session? Or is it that you're going to farm it out to the Strategic Planning Commission? Or what do I tell people about what's the next step?
The next step is a referendum, as far as I'm concerned.
A referendum on what?
Well, that's what we got to figure out.
All right, so it could be as straightforward as that, without any additional planning in between.
Well, I think if we're going to go to a referendum, we got to educate people as to what they're voting about. And we'd have to, come up with some numbers along the lines of what Catherine was saying. But, I mean, you guys came up, the committee came up with some information. We just need, I think we need to elaborate on that and figure out what more we need to know and that we don't know now. And then I think the timing last time was if we had the question by September 1st, for the last one, that's 2 months?
60 days.
October, November.
Yeah, that was because
Yeah.
of the.
So we needed 2 months to get a question on the,
I don't think we went 2 months for this one.
we don't
So
think
that's March.
It was because it was a statewide, had to be approved by
This is local.
the Secretary of State.
Okay, so we'll find out, but, you know, we may have a month or two to come up with a referendum question, and during that time, we'll also have to educate ourselves in the town as to the whole situation, what's involved, and, you know, and what it would be that we're committing to.
So the referendum could be as early as May.
May, right.
Thank you.
Roz Fahey, Bishop Lane. I too am a little concerned that we just dissolved a committee that has worked 6 months or more. And basically, you're not going to take the information that they have, so you're just going to let them walk away. What are you going to do with all that information that they have guided the town with, as far as like the $14 million? Again, like Catherine said, why can't we just go to Centerbrook, since they already have the whole architectural plan of the building? I think we need to be able to tell the citizens, yes, this is what we're going to do. And as Gus said, use the extra, take some money for the planning department to bring this architectural plan together. That's why.
Catherine Ferrante, I just want to voice my support for the idea of going back to Centerbrook Partners for just an updated set of numbers on information that they already have. They've already done the work. It seems like a no-brainer to just have them updated. It seems like it would be a cost savings to the town rather than start the process all over again.
If you hold to the original $200,000 allotment for a fourth grade playground and not go up for an $800,000 playground with all the extravagances that are connected with that, then you've got a $600,000 amount that you can put toward Academy now.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Liaison report, selectmen comments.
Library fence is up. Building is moving forward. Did you everybody take a peek at it downtown? We have a new librarian, and the building is moving forward. The fence is up. Good news there. Progress. Good. That's all I have.
So I'd just like to reiterate the subject of Tom's recent column in The Source about the ambulance. So we have a privately funded ambulance association. That's a not-for-profit. They're not volunteers. They are supplemented by the town, but they do not rely on us for the majority of their operating expenses. They rely on reimbursement from the state, which is at best a losing proposition. They get about 50 cents on the dollar in allowable reimbursements for calls that they make where they transport somebody. If they go to your house, or my house, or Tom's house, and they don't take you, they incur the expense of the call, but they don't get paid anything. So they really rely on community contributions. And we have a fairly unique model. They keep 2 ambulances on the road 24 hours a day. And in the course of a year, there were only, I think, 15 or 16 instances where 2 wasn't enough and Guilford or a surrounding town had to come in and assist us. So this is an emergency service that we really want to be staffing for 100% availability. It's an important service. We have very, very good response times in town. I think our response time is about 5 minutes. The national average is somewhere around 30. So we're substantially better than other communities. And where Tom asked if everybody contributed $50, their financial problems would quite literally go away. So I'm going to make the appeal again. If it isn't 50, if it's 5, if it's 10, if it's something, it helps, it makes a big difference, and this is an important organization in town to support.
Thank you, Bruce.
I'm going to pass.
I'm all set.
Me too.
Motion to adjourn.
There we go. Second, favor?
Aye.